You know, I don't think we are. And let me give you an example. When it came to the drug offenses, we reduced the penalties for small amounts of possession, but we also increased the penalties for selling to minors and other aggravated distribution cases. So actually there was also a sorting out, hopefully on a research basis, of which ones really present the most danger to the community. And we said on the small possession cases, and you don't go to prison on your first possession case. In fact, you don't go on your second. There are 19% of the prison population on any given day is on drugs, and on average they have 3 felony convictions. So the thought that someone on a small possession case takes up a prison bed who doesn't have a record just isn't accurate.
Give me what is a small possession charge?
Well, I think
we're talking about a couple ounces of pot.
No, a couple ounces of pot is actually a misdemeanor offense. Yeah, and
would you like to buy some then?
It's a petty offense if you have under the new law. If actually they have less than 5 ounces or 2 ounces, if it's less than 2 ounces. So no, small amount of possession is a petty offense. It's a fine. But we're talking about what happened, John, is that you often have repeat offenders. A guy that has a drug habit picks up a possession, deals a small rock to keep his possession alive, screws up probation, screws up community corrections, ends up taking a prison bed after he does this cycle. And what we did with the...
Pardon me for being so completely illiterate.
Yes.
Small rock of what?
Cocaine, crack cocaine, for example, say.
I do that to throw the law off, actually, but it works well.
Yeah. So the question became, can we do better with those guys outside a prison sentence? Can we find better treatment, better community corrections, better therapeutic communities? That means taxpayers don't spend 3 years at $30,000 a year, but maybe spend $5,000 to $10,000 on treatment and let them support some of their way in a halfway house. That was kind of the idea, was to say, let's find the most effective treatment for the low-end drug offenders who are more possession, but also keep stiff penalties against guys that are dealing, especially ones that are dealing to kids or dealing with guns.
So as far as get tough prosecutors, you're okay with these changes?
Yes, as long as we follow through with the treatment.
Right.
The treatment is going to be key, and it has to be effective treatment. If that doesn't happen, then I don't see that we're going to be successful.
Did Republicans buy off on these laws this year? I mean, was this a...
Well, the House sponsor of the drug sentence reform bill was a Republican, Mark Waller, former prosecutor from El Paso County. We had pretty much bipartisan buy-in, I think, on all the bills that came out of the Criminal and Juvenile Justice Commission, because they made sense, and because the commission itself is structured to produce that kind of outcome. We have a Democratic prosecutor, we have Pete Houtzinger, a Republican prosecutor from Mesa County, public defenders, judges, probation officers, victim advocates, treatment providers, Democratic legislators, Republican legislators, and if this group can get to a yes.
Was the real draw, though, saving money? Was that the horse that was drawing this carriage?
I'm going to say no. I think that's a very happy byproduct of what we've done. I think, to me, and of course I'm a bleeding heart liberal, the real driving force was that what we were doing was not effective.
Tell me that. What was not effective? Because it seems to me, if bad guys are in jail, they're in jail. They're
go
gone.
back to the fact that 95% of them are coming out of jail.
Well, that's the problem with you bleeding heart liberals letting them out.
It's not effective because we had a recidivism rate of over 50%. It's not effective because the budget was going up. But if we had if we had an unlimited amount of money, the budget going up, I suppose, wouldn't have been a problem. Except you have to look at all these indicators and say something that we're doing is not working.
All right. So what wasn't working? Why was a recidivism rate so high?
John, well, first of all, and I want to say this, is that when the violent crime rate's gone down the last 2 years, our prison population, we're down to about a 2% increase, which is much less than the previous 25 years. And so in 2008 and 2009, we really have kind of reached a plateau because violent crime has gone down and we're not sending as many people to prison. But we shouldn't back off and say, okay, let's just go to the incarceration model again. We ought to use this as a breather to say, how can we change the system to be more effective? And I think that's what you're asking. The three biggest things when you get out of prison to be successful is that you have job and job skills, that you don't have a substance abuse or mental health issue that's not being dealt with, and that you have some place to live. You have family support or some stable housing. Those people get out of prison without those three all the time. One of the most effective programs the Department of Correction has is for big machine operators. That has a recidivism rate of very, very low compared to other people, regardless of what crime they did. And so we know that once we incarcerate somebody, we can do a better job making sure when they get out that they have job skills and an education. 68% of the inmates in
You're turning soft on me, aren't you? You're turning squishy, aren't you?
68% of the Department of Corrections doesn't have a high school diploma. 80% of the Department of Corrections have drug issues or alcohol issues. So we know what they had coming in, and why do we think if we don't address them, if we don't give them job skills and housing, Would they think they're going to be successful on the way out, John? And they are going to get out. If just
Well,
locking them up is like grounding your kid and saying,
the
okay,
other-
it works as long as your kid's grounded, but at some point, the kid's going to get back out and go to school.
Grounding works for me.
Well, the other piece of that is what you were alluding to before, the substance abuse problem and the mental health problem of offenders who are incarcerated. If they go in with a substance abuse problem, if it doesn't get treated, they come out with a substance abuse problem. Mental health is the same way. And that's what has really driven a lot of our prison population upwards. If you take your approach and say, well, as long as they're locked up, we're all safe, you either have to lock
We
them
are
up
all
forever, which is very expensive, or you just execute them immediately.
Yes, now you're talking like
Okay,
me.
Yeah. But I don't think that's going to be palatable to more than maybe you and some of your friends.
We're willing to do it. I know guys.
So, you know guys.
I know
yeah.
guys. I know a
you
guy.
know guys
I
who
know
know
that guy who knows
guys.
a guy.
Yeah.
All right. So let me talk about this treatment part and people who go there with addictions.
Right.
Are they getting drugs in jail, or when they come back? After you're in jail for a few years, shouldn't you be free and clear? What's going wrong there?
The answer is limited amount of contraband gets in. That's not the biggest issue. The biggest issue is they go in with the addiction and the crossover mental health issues. It's called co-occurring. That often occurs when somebody has a mental health condition and a substance abuse addiction, and they don't get that thought process that issues treated. Then when they get out, they're going to have the same issues they go in because they hadn't dealt with them. So the answer is no. Abstinence is not the most effective part of treatment. The most effective way of treating is treating both the physical and mental addiction as well as the mental illness that goes along with it.
Why that's not palatable to a lot of conservatives. A lot of conservatives will look at that and go, wait a second. Here's a guy who committed a crime, who hurt people, victimized people, and we're going to work on training him. We're going to work on giving him housing when he gets out. We're going to work on giving him mental health therapy and seeing a shrink.
Well, what else are you going to do? I mean, really, again, you either lock them up forever or you got to confront the fact that when this offender gets out, if you don't want them to reoffend, they need to have some job skills. They need to have dealt with their substance abuse problem. I mean, your approach is a dumb approach.
It's not the first time, honey.
We're not married.
I mean, that's a technical term because we're trying to be smart on crime, and so the opposite is dumb. I mean, if you just say we're going to lock them up and we're going to make that time as hard as we can make that time be, no gym, no fresh air, no good food, no job skills, no education, no substance abuse, no mental health treatment, none of that, what are you going to get at the end of 10 years in prison? I don't think you're going to get a functioning member of society. So this isn't being squishy and a bleeding heart liberal. This is trying to be a little smarter about the product that the Department of Corrections is producing.
Let's talk about some of the specifics. What came out of the legislature this year that the governor signed that you think is the most substantial change to sentencing law? And actually, before that, when was the last time Colorado took a look at sentencing? When was the last time we sat down and said, let's see if we can tweak this?
The Milky Amendments in the 1980s, I think, was the last time. And that
1980s?
That mostly consisted of just lengthening sentences. And I'll have Representative Levy talk about it. And since then, there's been tweaking, but there's been tweaking at different points rather than looking at the entire quilt. We've been adding this square or taking this one out. And I think what's different about this is that we said, okay, hold on, let's take a step back to the 5,000 foot level and look at the system and say, as a system, can we do a better job? Can we address some of the issues Claire was saying about not having a recidivism rate of 50% at 3 years or 60% at 5 years?